1919, the city drowned in sweetness, and silence broke into thunder. In Boston's North End, winter made the streets brittle and narrow. Horses stamped frost from their hooves. Laundry stiffened on lines like flags that refused to move. Over Commercial Street, a steel giant brooded, a cylindrical molasses tank, 50 feet high, 90 feet across, belonging to Purity Distilling, filled near to its crown with dark, heavy syrup destined for industrial alcohol. Neighbors knew the tank's moods. It sweated sticky tears in summer. Boys cupped hands to catch them. Mothers scolded and scrubbed. Workmen painted over leaks to hide the amber stains. The structure hummed when trains rattled the nearby elevated tracks. Rivets ticked like insects inside metal skin. On January 15th, 1919, the air softened above freezing, warmth rolling over days of bitter cold. Inside the shell, thousands of tons of molasses shifted and breathed. At noon, dock hands ate from tin pails, firefighters played checkers in their station, and a freight crew stacked barrels at the wharf. The tank loomed the way familiar dangers do, present, ignored, essential to the business of the day. No one thought about style thickness or calculations not made. No one considered that syrup could run like avalanche and strike with the fist of a sea. The city carried on, unaware that pressure had found a seam and fate had found a timetable. Just after midday, the tank spoke in a language of failure. First, a staccato pinging, rivet heads letting go one by one, sharp as hail on iron. Then a low metallic groan swelled to an animal roar. The north wall split open like a seam torn by invisible hands, and 2 million gallons of molasses leapt into daylight. Witnesses would later call it a wave. 20+ feet high, moving faster than a sprint, thick as grief. It sheared timbers, twisted rails, and bulldozed wagons as if they were toys. Windows vanished into brown glass. Doors blew inward. The firehouse at the corner folded and dropped like a book closed by a giant palm. The elevated line shuddered, girders bowing. A streetcar lurched as if remembering an appointment with gravity and then, mercifully, held. Molasses did not run. It advanced, a heavy, dragging surge that pulled at ankles, hips, and lungs. Barrels bobbed like corks, then sank as syrup found their seams. A delivery horse tried to climb the wave and disappeared. Another reared, went down, and was gone. The air filled with a sweetness so strong it turned to nausea, a winter perfume that made men gag as they fought for footing. When the roar ended, the city did not hear silence. It heard a thick, relentless hiss, the sound of weight settling where streets had been. When motion stopped, the neighborhood became a map of trapped islands. Waist-deep molasses held people where they stood. Those who fell could not rise. Rescuers learned that struggling pulled you deeper. Boards became rafts and ladders bridges. Men lay flat to crawl, distributing weight on the surface like skaters on thin ice. Debris drifted with slow malice. Crates, beams, a door that had belonged to someone's warm kitchen, and each object carried the strength of its mass, multiplied by the tar-thick flow. The firehouse bell, torn from its frame, lay half-submerged, a drowned tongue in a bronze mouth. From the wharf, The harbor tug edged its bow into the brown field and found it could not push. Propellers churned sweetness into foam and made no path. Above, the elevated tracks held, but the steel sang with strain. On rooftops, figures waved arms and flags, signaling paths to pockets of movement. In alley mouths, molasses pooled into dark mirrors that reflected a winter sky too blue for what lay beneath. The city's heartbeat, usually a clatter of wheels and talk, narrowed to the work of hands and the arithmetic of leverage. Planks, ropes, winches, each bargain measured against the drag of a fluid pretending to be ground. As the winter sun slid away, lanterns pricked the dusk. Police, sailors, and firefighters formed lines at the edges of the flood, laying doors and scaffolds to make causeways. The U.S. Army and Red Cross brought blankets, stretchers, and hot coffee that steamed like small miracles against the cold. Salt water pumps drew from the harbor and sent bitter torrents across the streets, thinning syrup into something a shovel could persuade. It was work of inches. Boots tore free with wet pops. Coats stiffened into sugared armor. Saws chewed at timber, and crowbars worried at doors swollen by sweetness. In the ruins of the firehouse, rescuers tunneled through sticky darkness, lantern light bent by the brown air. At the freight yard, men used skiffs as sleds, dragging them over the surface to carry the injured, the overwhelmed, the simply exhausted. Toward midnight, frost took the edges back. Molasses cooled and thickened, hardening into a surface that would dent under a heel and refuse a hand. Dogs lost scent, hoses glazed, lantern glass filmed with sugar. Still the city pushed. Spades, ropes, and the slow grammar of rescue repeated until muscles gave out. Where the wave had been a single noise, the night broke into many. A winch ratchet, a fire pump's thud, the soft hiss of steam on cold iron. Somewhere far down Commercial Street, a church bell tolled the hour, clean and thin over the heavy work. Dawn revealed numbers the night only suggested. 21 dead, more than 150 injured, and a neighborhood rearranged, buildings levered off foundations, walls peeled like labels from jars. The north end smelled like a bakery dreamed by a madman. Stable yards were quiet in a way that indicted the flood more than any ledger could. Horses had no defense against sweetness that became a trap. Reporters arrived with notebooks and boots that stuck, each step leaving a sound like a kiss. Photographers posed tripods where streets still pretended to be streets. Elsewhere, teams shoveled molasses into wagons, sanded intersections, and sluiced shop fronts with brine until signs reappeared letter by letter. The rail line straightened with surgical care. A streetcar, rescued from sugar, rang its bell as if clearing its throat. The toll did not stop at names on a list. In kitchens, aprons went stiff. In laundries, starch met a rival. In police stations, telephones gummed up overnight. The harbor turned a lighter brown along the wharf where hoses emptied their arguments. The cleanup, everyone realized, would be a season, not a shift. Yet Boston performed its stubborn ritual. Take stock, set jaw, begin again. The hearing rooms filled with charts, samples, and the confidence of men who speak in figures. Engineers measured plate thickness and found it wanting. Metallurgists read fractures like palm lines and told of steel that turned brittle in cold. Clerks unearthed memoranda that said what paint had disguised, leaks ignored, tests not performed, a tank filled beyond wisdom. Warm weather after a freeze had raised pressure. Fermentation had stirred the brew. Rivets were too few, their heads too small. Lawyers for United States Industrial Alcohol argued weather and chance, but the evidence walked in under its own weight. Witnesses traced the wave through maps. Inspectors set a rivet on velvet like a bullet on a courtroom altar. The verdict, when it came, spoke a new dialect for the age. Corporate negligence, liability owed to a neighborhood that had not asked to be the endpoint of profit. Outside, the city moved around the building the way water moves around a piling, swirling, then gone. Inside, language turned the flood into precedent. Safety standards would tighten. Tanks would be tested with water instead of hope. Steel would be chosen by calculation, not convenience. The molasses had taught a lesson every engineer already knew and too many ignored. Weight remembers. Years later, the plaque on Commercial Street would mark the spot with tidy sentences, and tourists would stand where syrup once ran like fate. Boston learned to joke about a city that smelled of molasses for months, but memory kept sharper edges. A bell without a voice. A watch stopped not by water, but by sugar. A photograph mottled where sweetness had dried hard. Scientists would write about non-Newtonian flow, about how viscous waves behave like avalanches, fast at first, then choking on their own thickness. City planners would add the flood to a list of lessons etched by fire and water. Build with doubt as a partner. Ask metal to prove itself before you trust it above a street. In classrooms, the disaster would share a page with equations, the story inside the math. The North End healed as cities do, by living over its wounds. New lines ran where old ones broke. Children played in alleys that had once floated. But some nights, a winter wind off the harbor still smells faintly of sugar and iron, and the mind supplies a sound the air does not carry. A run of rivet pings, a single long groan, a wave arriving where no sea should be. The Great Flood passed. The idea of it remained. Sweetness turned weapon, carelessness turned weather.